Today, we're going to be covering the Socratic Method and how to turn conversations into cash. Now, this is a really, really powerful tool to have in your toolkit, and it's a really powerful skill to develop. And so, think about how many conversations you're having on a daily basis, especially in a sales environment, and how many have been, or you felt like either going into them or halfway through that there's potential to make some money off of this conversation. And then how many have actually ended in making money from the conversation? Probably a very low number, which is normal. And no one expects to make money off of every conversation. However, you've probably been a bit more optimistic at the start of the call or conversation, and then a little bit disappointed at the end. And you'll end up giving yourselves reasons as to why, but deep down, you know it's because of you probably. And it's like, how many times are you going to receive certain objections? How many more times are you going to actually believe them? Because it's very often we trust people and we think, oh, they wouldn't lie to us, would they? Like they generally, I actually think they have got some things going on in their life, or they haven't got the money, or they do just have to speak to their partner. Oftentimes we believe people because we trust them. We think people are nice. But at the end of the day, most of the time they're lying. So on that trust idea, we've got oxytocin, which is commonly referred to as the love drug. But in actual fact, it's the trust drug. Okay. And nothing stimulates a buying decision as fast as trust. Okay. And it wasn't really available to us as humans 50,000 years ago. But something happened around 50,000 years ago where trust literally became more important. And we went through some evolutionary changes. And one of those changes that we went through is the fact that we show the whites of our eyes. Because prior to that, we didn't actually show the whites of our eyes. And one of the reasons of this is because land bridges became apparent after the end of the Great Ice Age, which is give or take around 50,000 years ago. And so people started meeting other people of different looks, of different species, of different color, and they had no prior or no previous experience of it. And so you had to determine, had to be able to determine whether or not you could actually trust this person or not. And that distance is around a spear throwing distance. Because if they got too close and they turned out to be willing to do you harm, there was no way you could look at their eyes because it's too far away. And so even though all animals have got whites in their eyes, it's very rarely displayed. And this is just some general interesting research you can go down if that kind of stuff interests you. And so by putting your eyes on a white background, you can actually see them and you can see whether they're moving backwards or forwards, looking left or right. And that whole business about your eyes are the window to your soul, it's absolutely true. And we've got this real sort of sixth sense or survival sense, call it whatever you like, but it's a primal safety mechanism to determine whether we trust or not. And so we can do that in an instant, and that's oxytocin. And it's the main neuromodulator for trust. So it's one of the things that we had to develop around that time. And so when you are asking people questions, you're showing and demonstrating interest in them. And that's a trust factor because people love talking about themselves. And they'll go away and leave the conversation and think, oh, gee, that was a really good conversation. They're feeling good. And they'll go away with a whole bunch of neurochemicals working in their system. And one of those neurochemicals will be serotonin, and the other will be oxytocin. And those neuromodulators will send a cognitive message that says that was a really interesting conversation because you were interested. So you become interesting by being interested. It's just the ending of the words. And being interested is a precursor to the ability to be able to influence and persuade. Someone's going to leave a conversation having just talked about themselves for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, however long, and they're going to think, what an interesting conversation. Because everything they're saying is familiar. And it's the familiar that you trust. Even the musicality of their own voice is a really familiar thing. And it's the familiar that you trust. But it's the unfamiliar that creates distrust. And the unfamiliar creates those stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline. And it's unfamiliar, therefore it's unsafe. And there is nothing that will stimulate a buying decision as fast as trust. And there is nothing that will stimulate anything further than the survival mechanism. You can override it, but you can't not feel it because of the chemicals, the neurochemistry, and the neuromodulators that are kicking around. And so basically, it's a very, very chemical process. And so we have two primary motivators. One is pain and one is pleasure. And if you understand a person's primary motivator, you can generally guide them anywhere as long as it's appropriate to do so. You can manipulate people, and you can use the same skills for good or bad. It's just what you do with them, but they're the same skills. And so I hope that you're going to try and use these for good, not bad, but it's up to you. I'm not telling you to do the bad. That's on your own. And so for most people, their primary motivator is actually pain. Now you think it would be pleasure, but it's not. Most people use pleasure to try and avoid or mask the pain or discomfort. Because you're always manipulated with pleasure, but you're always put into pain. You're always manipulated by pleasure to put yourself into a disadvantage. So the social engineering always uses pleasure and kind of devils these little carrots in front of you. But to you, it's always long-term discomfort. It's long-term pain with this idea that you'll kind of get there one day, right? And so it's this idea of sacrificing what you want most for what you want now. You're sold the benefits, but you're actually put into a disadvantage, which is pain. And so the primary motivator to get them to do anything is actually pain. And so if you ever go back and consider some of the decisions that you've ever made around relationships, especially to end them, they're not actually ended because whatever you got into that relationship is dried up. Because you're going to procrastinate, you're going to push, you're going to press, you're going to delay, and you're going to do all of those sorts of things and convince yourself and have the conversations with yourself of like, oh, I don't know, like things will change, let's wait and see if it works out. Anything along those lines. But it's actually not until you hit your pain threshold that you actually take action. And so you're waiting and waiting and waiting for there to be enough. And so that's a primary pain motivated person. Because you don't often say at the first hurdle, like, oh, okay, this isn't working out, so I'm out of here. It would be great if we did, because then you wouldn't have to wait and deal with all the struggle in painful situations. And the point is to understand the primary motivator of your ideal client and then tap into that. If it's pain, your job is to actually give them more pain, which sounds counterintuitive. And it's something that most of you are not really keen to do. But then you can't get their attention. You can't motivate them because pain is their primary motivator and you're not willing to give it to them. And so an idea to understand is that you're going to make it worse before you can make it better for them. And so when we talk about survival, our primal emotions are a huge factor here. And primal emotions are emotions associated with survival. And there's really two sides to survival that are really, really important. One is the keeping a safe side of survival. And the other one is basically passing on our gene side of survival. And so we've got emotions around safety and security, and they're very primal. But we've also got some emotions around status and control. And they've got to do with winning the favor of others so that we can mate and then pass on our genes. So to create high conversion marketing or sales content, it's almost like we're whispering to those primal emotions. So it's the primal emotions that you actually want to target. And so when you're using marketing and sales, for it to be high converting, it's like actually whispering to those emotions. Now, you can obviously be much more direct than whispering, of course, but basically your success is going to be whispering to those emotions. And that whispering to emotions works because of who we are and what the environment that we grew up in was. And it allows us to scale things up simply because of some discoveries that Sigmund Freud made in the early 1900s. And basically, he was the first one to really identify these powerful psychological and emotional forces that are hidden deep within the minds of all human beings. Now, when we say deep within the minds of human beings, we're talking about the subconscious. And so you have to be able to influence those subconscious and unconscious drives. So we're not talking about anything on the surface. We're not talking about anything that's logical, and we're not talking about anything that's rational. And so we've got to really understand that we've got to go deeper than the superficial if we actually want to develop a business so that it provides the finances or the money or the income or the revenue that allows you to live the lifestyle that you want to live. And your success is not going to come as a result of anything that's logical or anything that's rational, even though you may want it to. So however you think about what you're doing, however you want to structure your marketing, your copy, your negotiations, or your marketing, if you're sitting there and being conscious and you're just trying to play the game of social chit chat, you're not actually tapping into it or targeting or trying to move or trying to persuade or trying to influence those unconscious drives. Now, there are lots of different ways that you can influence those unconscious drives. And these drives are based on extremely powerful evolutionary survival impulses. And those survival impulses are either to seek pleasure or to avoid pain. If you're using the wrong one for the wrong person, you're not actually going to be tapping into what I would call their pre-purchase intent. So if you don't know initially what it is, you might use copy or language patterns that target both of them. And for your marketing to be successful, you need to direct it towards the drivers of human nature to satisfy certain needs and desires. So you need to tap directly into our impulses or those subconscious impulses of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And pleasure-oriented people generally don't have anywhere near the same amount of challenges as pain-avoiding people. So basically, most people who are looking for solutions are pain avoiders because they won't actually get off their ass and do the necessary work. Because how easy is it to look something up on Google nowadays? It's just so easy, and yet people don't do it. So they're always going to come to you looking for an answer. Why? Because you're going to shortcut that process for them, which means that you're going to offer them some pleasure and you're allowing them to avoid doing all the necessary work. And you're also allowing them to avoid taking the responsibility of being responsible for their own results, which means that you're going to have a customer for life. So that's good for our purposes. And so to increase your profitability, you've got to influence the real decision brain. And I'm going to make the assumption that you have the intention of increasing your profitability in what it is that you do, or what it is that you're seeking to learn to do. And so this real decision brain has a series of elements that we can loosely call language. And there are 6 elements, and those elements are attention, contrast, tangible outcomes, me-centricity, emotion, and it's a visual processor. And so they're the 6 elements, and you've got to be able to use those elements to influence it. Now, I've spoken extensively on those 6 elements, so I'm not going to go into it today. There are some resources I can send, and obviously for the guys that are in the private community, then you've got access to that. But yeah, I'm not going to cover that today. I've spoken a lot on that this year. And so your job is to now start to understand that the real decision maker is going to respond to a particular language structure. And so modern marketing is based on methods devised to enhance commercial interests by exploiting those subconscious impulses of seeking pleasure and avoiding pain. And knowledge of desire was used to gain more control over public opinion. And the more control you had over public opinion, then the more control you had over their spending power. And one of the most famous marketers of this previous century was Sigmund Freud's nephew, Edward Bernays. And Bernays used Freud's discoveries to manipulate consumer spending patterns so that profits could be made, that profits could be exploited from consumers. And so he used the discoveries of those unconscious drives and urges to manipulate. And so questions arrive is like, how are these unconscious drives assessed? How do you influence them? And how do you access them? And there are quite a few quite a few pathways of influence, but there's two really dominant pathways. And one of them has to do with the work as suggested by Daniel Kahneman. And in his work, he won a Nobel Prize for demonstrating the irrationality of the human mind. And it's really, really interesting stuff. It's a really good book. It will come up in the next slide. But the challenge is that we all think we're rational. However, if we were really rational, we wouldn't allow ourselves to experience the current results that we're unsatisfied with. And so basically, Kahneman, he demonstrated the irrationality of the human mind. And there's a lot of talk, and people talk about common sense as though success is common sense, but it's not. Unsuccess is common sense, right? Because common sense is the sense that everyone has in common. And if they're all struggling, and if they're all subject to the social engineering, then it's not common sense. What you want is uncommon sense. It's the sense that most people don't have. That's what you really want to seek out. Also hinting at why I really like Uncommon Success, the name for Keeks. He did well with that. And so in his book, Thinking Fast and Slow, Kahneman identified two modes of thinking, which he refers to as System 1 and System 2 thinking. And we'll use those terms going forward for today. And System 1 thinking is the unconscious drive to satisfy our primal needs. And if you want to be more influential, more effective, and drive greater revenues, you've got to be influencing System 1 thinking. Because it's the unconscious drive to satisfy primal needs. It's lightning fast, it's instinctive, and it's emotional. And so there's a clue there. It's lightning fast. Nothing rational or logical about it. It's instinctive. Nothing radical or logical about it. And it's emotional. There's nothing rational or logical about it. And so if you can influence it, then you're going to be an amazing entrepreneur, a brilliant entrepreneur, business person, whatever. But you're actually going to be able to give yourself a lifestyle that is one of choice, not conformity. And so System 2 thinking is carried out in our modern brain. And it's slow, deliberate, rational, and logical. And yet it's the brain that most people try to target. That's the brain we try and appeal to. Like, will they like me? Am I wearing the right clothes? Is my hair the right way? Like, etc. Those kind of things. So to become more profitable, you've got to eliminate your need to sell and supplant it with your ideal customer's desire to buy. People love to buy, but they hate to feel sold to. And so you are not going to create desire. Desire is already there. We just need to discover it and magnify it. Because what they want is they want to buy a solution to whatever problem they're going through or problem they've got going on. And that's why you've got to know them better than they know themselves. And that's why you've got to know the limits of their discomfort zone. Because anything more than that causes them to shrink back into comfort or distress. And so you achieve this by influencing system one thinking, not by influencing system two. And yet that's what most people in business attempt to do. And so influencing system one thinking begins by creating this space where people feel genuine benefit and support. And so if you influence it by your language patterns, you influence it by using the 6 elements of the language of the decision brain. And you influence it by knowing what actual part of the brain is making decisions. But most importantly, it's showing that you can help them rather than telling them. Because they want to buy a solution to something. And that solution is something that's going to give them more pleasure or give them less pain or move them away from the pain or closer to pleasure or whatever way you want to language it. But by showing rather than telling, it allows them to buy you before they actually see your offer. And that's a really, really important point. They're going to buy you emotionally. They're not going to buy you intellectually or cognitively. And that's what achievement is all about. It's actually creating this kind of like mind meld. They know they feel some sort of familiarity because it's safe. And anything that creates that sort of serotonin or oxytocin is going to be really, really attractive for them. And so if you've got a good product or service, but you're not actually generating enough sales, the first thing to check is whether or not you're actually truly connecting with your ideal customer. Because if you don't know, if you're just looking around, if you're just looking at people like everyone's a customer, then that's not going to be a profitable pathway. You've got to know them and you've got to actually go to where they are. So in other words, you've got to hunt them out. And then you've got to whisper at their emotions. Now, there's lots of content in the programs that some of the guys have access to about understanding the avatar and the psychographic nature of that avatar. But the big point I want to stress is that they need to buy you before they actually buy your product. And so if you think about system two thinking, it's logical, it's got facts, it's got rational observations. And so you might convince by trying to overcome objections by using logical, rational, old school sales processes. But the fact is that we have a critical faculty. And that critical faculty is really the filtering mechanism between the conscious facility we have and the unconscious facility that we have. Now, the unconscious facility is lightning fast, so that's system one thinking. And it can sense distrust from the back of the room. Okay, and it can basically, as soon as you do that, then it creates resistance and it actually creates rejection. And that means no action. And it's a filtering mechanism that you have to understand exists. And there's no point trying to get anything through from the conscious brain to the subconscious brain because the subconscious brain won't actually buy it. And so traditional marketing is generally rejected by system one thinking because it triggers primal emotions of distrust and warnings of alert. And these are all threats to survival. So it basically shut you out and it reject you lightning fast. And I had a lot of resistance to this kind of stuff at the start because it felt a bit woo-woo. But this is a hardcore neuroscience. This can all be backed. And so when you influence system one thinking, you internally guide their system to be more accepting of your solutions. And that's how you become more profitable. So if you want to experience greater profits, then you must be influencing system one thinking. System one thinking is far more profitable than trying to influence system two thinking. And yet the default position is to always try and influence and use tactics and strategies to try and get around objections. But why are they objecting? Because you haven't built trust and rapport. If you're using fancy techniques to overcome rejection, really what you're going to do is you're going to get a customer that's going to regret buying from you in the long run. And if they've got objections, they're basically not your ideal customer, because everyone wants solutions. I want solutions. You want solutions. So do your customers. And so it's really important to remember that you're going to spend more than you earn over your lifetime. So it's not spending money. Money is never the issue, because they're going to spend all the money. They're just going to spend it with someone else, not you. And if money is never the issue, then what's the issue? The issue is you haven't actually stimulated system one. You haven't conveyed value. You haven't built value up, because anybody will spend any amount of money as long as they perceive that what they're going to get back is greater than what they're going to spend. And that's the really, really key point. As long as they perceive that what they're going to get in return is greater than what it took them to actually get the money that they're going to spend. Because people will spend $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 on a wedding dress they're only going to ever wear once in their life. How the fuck is that logical or rational? Right? People will spend $6,000, $10,000 going on like a 21-day cruise. They come back at the end of it and they've got a $10,000 loss, but they've got happy pictures of, drinking a pina colada at the bar or the pool. And they're going around telling all their friends how wonderful it was losing all this money. How's that? Like, how rational and logical is that? Not very. And so these primal emotions trigger what is ultimately true for them. And so high conversion starts when you identify and stimulate their primal emotions. It starts when you inhabit their world and feel and see and hear exactly what they are feeling and seeing and want. It's about you suspending your own me-centricity in order to get into the me-centric center of your ideal customer. Because it's only from their me-centricity that you can actually influence system one thinking. It's me-centric, so basically they only care about what's in it for themselves. And that's a survival mechanism. It's not an arrogant mechanism. So when someone convinces themselves of something, then they'll actually stick to that position and you can't leverage it out of them. And if they make the decision, then they'll stick to that decision and they'll defend it. So that's what you want to do. You want to get them to stimulate to make the decision themselves. And so system one conversion is all about helping people influence themselves from their perspective. And system one conversion is getting them to influence themselves from their perspective, from their me-centric needs, from the solutions that they want, from the benefits that they want to experience. If your focus is on your needs, your wants and desires, that's where you trigger distrust. Not through your needs and for your income. Because if that's your focus, you're not actually going to be focused on them. You're going to be triggering distrust because you're focusing on your needs. And so by stepping out of your world and developing a few skills for entering the world of your customers and their desires, that's where your revenue generation becomes much more effective than it is otherwise. And so you begin to see your customers not as like a conquest, not as some sort of win or some trophy. And then you can add everything up at the end of the week and say, oh, I got a few more dollars in my pocket. But you'll start to see them as genuine, you'll see them as people with genuine struggles that you can actually help with because you've got best fit solutions for them. And now everyone else in your field of endeavor, they're assuming that they've got the best fit solutions. But see, if you don't learn how to convey, you become what's called a commodity. And the commodity is just simply one of the same of other things. And then you become fungible, which basically means you're just interchangeable. So if you introduce yourself as a health coach, then you're just like a dozen other health coaches. There's nothing distinguishing you about you, and so you become anonymous. and you become a commodity, and then you compete on the lowest price. That's why most people who are service-oriented people can't up their price, because there's a ceiling to what you can charge, and it's based on what everyone else is charged. And so when you step outside of that, you can actually make yourself really unique. And that's where you really get to understand value and how to exchange value and how to communicate value, that you can name your own price. But you've got to be able to step outside that fungibility process. And the more you stay in your world of needs, the more value exchange diminishes. Because you'll be subconsciously filtering everything through your needs and not tapping into their deep emotional needs. They're really deep emotional needs. And you're not stimulating system one. You're working from your own system one. And the other way you can influence system one thinking is through questioning. And that's where the Socratic methodology comes into it. And so Socrates developed a form of questioning where he would help his students explore their internal world. And that's all it was. He didn't really care what the answer was, because it wasn't about him. It was all about them. And so he wanted people to be able to explore their inner world to see if what they were saying or doing actually matched their truth. But if the truth didn't hold up, then that was the perfect time to change, because it's them arriving at a point saying, oh, I've always believed this, but maybe I can see it differently now. And one of the things that you always find people thinking that they can actually do it themselves, but they never do. But when you actually get them to understand if they could do it, then they would have already done it. So the fact that they're looking for a solution means that they can't do it themselves. So Socrates developed this whole series of questioning techniques or strategies, excuse me, to help them arrive at the truth by examining things. And if the truth held up, then that was fine. And if you get people to hear or feel their truth, then they'll work with you, because no one's ever enabled them to actually hear or feel their truth. They just have these uncontrolled thoughts running around, like, yeah, I can do it, I can do it. I'll get around to it one day, I'll do it one day, and one day I'll make it happen. And then another decade goes by. And so if their truth doesn't hold up, then they're able to see new truths by way of their own reasoning. And then they'll actually defend that. Because again, we're stimulating system one based on their truth, not your truth. And so Socrates didn't attempt to instruct or convince. He just used questions to promote internal discovery. And by the way he asked those questions, they could arrive at their truth. And these were truths that were able to better serve them. And they will arrive at the truth that the ideas and the behaviors that they've been holding actually can't progress them. And so once they've arrived at that point, they can start looking for behavior and ideas that do have the potential to progress them. And people often have contradictions between what they want and the reasons why they're not getting it. And they can justify and rationalize away just about anything. And you can often hear the contradictions in their language, and they're just not conscious of it. And you certainly don't point it out. But you've got to be able to train your ears to hear those contradictions. Otherwise, you're not being attentive to them. You're working on your reply. And that's where the breakdown in communication happens. You're not actually being present. You're just working at your response or what your response will do whilst they're doing the talking. And that's because you're in your own me-centric, rational, logical process. It's a common thing. It's not your fault. But rather try and change them. If you can become aware of what's going on, then it's a lot easier to change yourself for a short period of time. And so while contradictions remain in place, solutions are never available. So the Socratic method enables you to ask questions to expose these contradictions and then guide your clients to work towards workable solutions that are going to be best fit for them. And these primal emotions are really powerful triggers of human behavior. And so we've got to be able to influence and trigger those primal emotions. And they're not rational and they're not logical. They fire with urgency and immediacy. Because if a fear event happens, you're triggered. It's immediate. You cannot stop it. You can't turn it around. Obviously, until the threat to whatever is causing that fear goes away. But you can't not react. And so when you're allowing people and inviting people to speak about themselves, they feel listened to because you're not disagreeing with anything. And there's no vibe from you coming off that you're trying to get up your point of view across. And there's no kind of sort of uncomfortable battle of opinions. And so when they feel listened to, they tend to listen to themselves more openly because you've taken away any form of tension or of threat to safety. And so by applying the Socratic method to your marketing and in your sales, it generates intrinsic influence. So in other words, they influence themselves. So your influence stimulates an implied conclusion rather than an overt message that you should be doing this. And so when people ask you a question, one of the greatest challenges is to resist giving an answer, because if people ask you a question, you're trained to jump to the position of, oh, I know the answer to that. All right. You're not trained to think, oh, I wonder if there's like, if we could explore a little bit about what's behind that question. So it's your me centricity. It's your positioning for, look, I'm smart. I've got the answer. And so positioning for approval or positioning to win respect or status, all those sorts of things that you're going to be doing. And you're not really attending to them and being present to them. So it doesn't matter whether you know the answer or not. It's how could you offer the wisdom that you have in that answer so that this person can best receive it. And you don't know that until you actually start to explore a little bit about their world. And so basically it enables you to build rapport and trusting relationships based on value to the customer and client long before you meet them. And you can do this through presentations. You can do this through your posts, through anything. You can do it through social media. And so it's less irritating to consumers and when it comes to sales, because a lot of the work is already done because you're actually offering value. And so System 1 marketing is a way of allowing your clients to see your solutions as truths for themselves. And when you can do that, you will outcompete and outmarket anyone in your field. You will be the signature go-to person. And so to achieve this, you can start to design your questions in a way that's designed to get responses that are safe for them to give. And we can call those calibrated questions. And calibrated questions are thoughtfully designed questions you need to design that are relevant and appropriate to your customer, your ideal customer. And you need to be speaking these questions at any opportunity you get because they need to be at the tip of your tongue. Otherwise, you're never going to remember them and they're never going to come out at the appropriate time. So how many of you have left a call or conversation with someone and thought, oh, I should have asked this. I should have asked this. I should have asked that. So unless you're practicing, they're not on the tip of your tongue. And so if they're not at the tip of your tongue, you're just going to default to your old behavior. And the old behavior would just have you positioning for something. Positioning to be liked or not to be disliked, or to position for approval, or to position to be important. And so they're questions that walk your ideal client into their truth while providing them with a sense of control. Because if you're allowing them to feel, and you're encouraging them to feel in control of the conversation. And so well-designed questions encourage your clients to calculate their point of view, which is, of course, their truth, without you coming across as being somewhat aggressive or somewhat competitive or trying to win or trying to persuade or trying to influence. And they're how and what questions. They're never why questions. Big, big thing here. Because why questions tend to be an invasion of someone's privacy. And why questions require justification. And you don't want that. Because why questions don't actually allow your client or your prospect to introspect. And you want to ask questions that allow the client to introspect. So basically, you can use them to lead your clients and your prospects to their truth, not your truth. And calibrated questions will remove any sense of pushiness, resistance, or feelings to that other person that you're trying to manipulate. And so they're designed to literally openly acknowledge your clients. And so if you give them understanding, if you give them validation, if you give them acknowledgement, they're the three greatest gifts you can give anyone: to feel heard, to feel validated, to feel understood. And there's just not enough of that in the world at the moment. And when you openly validate and understand your clients, it lets you introduce new ideas without it feeling cold or feeling pushy. And so I'm going to take you through a little exercise right now. And so if you've got a pen and paper, then grab it, get it handy. And I want to give to these questions, give credit to Paul Council. He took me through these on the Gen Freedom course a few years ago, and it was a big eye opener for me, along with the discovery process I did with him. So if you haven't seen that, you can watch him do that with me. I can get a link to that. But this was a big, like I said, the biggest eye opener and a big oh shit moment to me. Right. And so these are just yes or no questions. I just want you to write yes or no. Don't think about it too much. Just what's the instinctual response? Yes or no. That's it. So hopefully you've all got pen and paper. Question one: are you much more financially prosperous now than you were a few years ago? Number two: have you got as much spending power now as you would actually like to have? Yes or no? Have you managed to elevate your business profits to levels that will give you the best generational lifestyle for you and your family? Have you got enough generational wealth to benefit your long-term financial needs and the financial needs of those that you wish to support? If you stayed with your current money results, would that give you the type of financial independence that allows you and your family to live your dream lifestyle? Have you achieved your dreams for creating the amount of income that you would need so that you can actually have the future prosperity that you desire? Last one. Is it a ridiculous idea for you to think that you could learn to systemize and leverage your business so that it produces the kind of generational wealth that gives you the future prosperity that you want? Now, if you answered yes to any of these questions, congratulations, because you are doing fantastically well. Now, how easy was it to say no? Pretty easy, right? Because see, saying no doesn't require commitment from you. But saying yes actually would require a commitment for you. Because you see, most salespeople, they say, like, you've got to get to yes, you've got to get it yes, you've got to get yes. But it doesn't actually create trust. It's not influencing system one. But saying no is a safe survival response because you don't have to create commitment. It's a safe, dominant response that allows you to stay and feel in control because nothing is being requested of you. And that's why if you can actually create calibrated questions that are designed to get no responses, and all of those questions are just actually designed to get a no, it's going to be safe for you. And if I'm making it safe for you, then what are we doing? Are we bonding? Are we connecting? What sort of chemistry is actually going on? Does that make sense? And so that's a calibrated question because I don't want you to answer yes. I want you to answer no. Now, you've got to design your questions for your audience. And the safest answer for somebody to give is no. You make it safe for them because that's now going to build up trust and rapport, and that's going to excite oxytocin, which is the trust drug. And here's another one. If you answered no to any of these questions, are you open to learning a few ideas that can help you achieve your dreams? So what answer do I want? It's the first
Yes.
time I wanted a yes answer. Yeah, it's the first time I wanted yes. Are you open to it? I'm not actually committing to you to anything. Are you just open to it? Yeah, sure. Is now a bad time to explore some of these ideas? What's the standard? Is now a good time? So what response do I want? No, I don't want another yes response. I want to know if it's a bad time. No, because again, it doesn't require anything from them. I've already got the yes. Now, for them to do the next stage, I still wouldn't actually go and try and present anything because I'm still doing system one thinking. I'm still trying to get them to see their truth and arrive at their truth. And so this next part is in the context of whatever business you're in. Okay. So I could say, look, on a scale of 1 to 10, one being, yeah, look, it's not really a good place, and 10 is, I'd really love to be there. I was wondering, where do you think your relationship, business, and physique is at right now? Now, what you've got there is a really tangible score. What you've got is their truth. Because I don't know how they come up with this number, but they do. Intrinsically, they knew that on a scale between 1 and 10, say they're a 6. I don't know how they did it, but they do. And so then it's like, we might look at that score and ask the question, look, is there anything that I'm not aware of that you would like to gain by staying where you are? What response am I looking for? No. Because if they said yes, I've got a problem on my hands. Right? And they're going to turn me or you into some sort of therapist, and we're not therapists, we're educators. Right? So what's important to you about moving your relationship, future wealth, or physique from a 6 to a 10? You don't even have to pick 10. You just pick any number. Now, the only way that you can answer that is to give me a list of your values. And then you'll see how I can kind of get down to the core values by taking people through that exercise. And now you could use that strategy for basically anything. You could use it to measure desire, discipline, motivation, time, financial resources, clarity, whatever. So on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 is I don't have any desire at all, and 10 is I've got burning desire. Where would you score yourself? On a scale of 1 to 10, how disciplined are you to actually put in the work in order to achieve the wellness or the fitness or the strength or whatever it is that you want to achieve? On a scale of 1 to 10, how motivated are you? Number 10 is, look, like I'd rip my dick off. 1 is, I don't know, I don't even know if I can get off the couch. How much time do you have available? 10 is you got an abundance of time. 1 is you don't have any time. What about financial resources? You've got to know their financial resources and what they are before you actually ask them for money. You got to know how deep their pockets are. Like on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 is you've got financial abundance. 1 is you've got no financial resources. Because if they've got no financial resources, do you really want to work with someone who's got no financial resources? Like this isn't about saving the world, right? This is about business. All right, we can save the world later. How clear are you in terms of the outcome or outcomes that you want to experience, or in terms of the goals you want to achieve? Now, what happens if they scored it like this? Then you've got a whole bunch of discovery processes now to work on. So we're still in the discovery phase here. What areas do you think you might need to work on first? Now, they're going to self-nominate because they've just seen their truth, haven't they? So without you telling them what to do, they're convincing themselves that they actually need to work on this area first. Okay? So that's where we start. What's the one thing that needs to click into place in order for you to get started? And if they tell you that, then they already know what needs to click into place. It's not you telling them anything. And so a high conversion approach allows your customers and prospects to feel safe and feel in control. When they feel safe and in control, they're more likely to work with you. Right? You might come to the end of it and have a list of things that you can offer. But you might be able to take half of them off and say, look, I don't actually need to offer this person what I've got. So it then makes your job a lot easier, because then you don't have to go all of the things of trial and error to then figure out, okay, they don't actually need this. Because how often do you walk into a cafe that's got 101 things on the menu and you don't have enough time to go through all of the things that are being offered? So you tend to just go with your favorite. And it's not to say that you couldn't at some time offer these extra things to them. It's just that they haven't nominated it as being important for them, for themselves. So you start with what's important for them, and they tell you where that start point is. And so now you've got all of this extra stuff up your sleeve. You've got this smorgasbord up your sleeve, but they can't handle the whole smorgasbord. So you don't have to offer it. You've only got to offer what's relevant to them. And they've just nominated what's relevant to them in this space and time. And so it's good if you can now get them to that stage, and then you can say, look, these other things are available. And you can use that same process to get them to move on to the next level. And so you can have a lifelong customer based on just this. So all you've got to do is stay ahead of them. Because if you've got a list of 10 things that you offer and they've narrowed it down to they only need number 1, just sell them on number 1. Then you can include all of the other things as a bonus. So now the whole package seems so much more valuable. Whereas most people won't even find out what the person needs and they'll offer them all 10. So now that's all of it. That's the only reference points they've got. So you need to get them emotionally invested before you've actually said what you're going to give them. Because everyone else is just pitching to them, aren't they? However, it's really important to understand there's nothing actually wrong with that, like presenting. This isn't about right and wrong, good or bad. This is about how do you actually increase your profits. So whatever you've been doing has worked to whatever level you can actually get it to work to, but you can't actually get it to work any further than that. So, okay, if we can't get it to work any further than that, because now you're at the limits of your skill sets, which is basically pitching to them, which is what most of us do. And so, is there something new that you can learn to supplant that and take it further? Of course, the answer is yes. And so that's how we move from every sort of five figure to multiple six and even seven figures here. And so to summarize, it's not what you do, it's how you communicate it. Okay. And with that, I will